Welcome back to Talking Point. Now, what should the role of a public library be, particularly when it comes to the interests of young children and their parents? And that is the key question, really at the heart of the debate tonight. If one thing is clear, Singapore parents are not going to come to a consensus anytime soon on whether their young children should be exposed to topics such as single parents or same-sex couples. So how should a public library navigate such waters? The NLB stance is, since it serves the community, it must reflect the views of the majority. Others disagree. They say its role is to preserve knowledge, not to withdraw it or to destroy it. So what do you think? Give us a call, 66910028, or you can tweet us at TelTP. At this point, let me welcome on a Google Hangout Dr. Geraldine Tan, Principal Psychologist with the Therapy Room. Also, incidentally, a parent. Geraldine, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Steve.
And just before we get to the discussion, we actually do have a caller with us right now. Lee Hak Ming, you're on the line with Talking Point. Go ahead, Hak Ming.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Yes.
Go ahead. You have a thought or a question with us?
I am a father of 4 children ranging from 6 to 15 years old. And I think that children at such age are still very young, and they do not have the ability to discern what is right and wrong. So, in my opinion, children at such a young age should not be exposed to such teachings and materials until they grow up.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Thank you, Hak Ming. Well, and that actually ties in with the first question, which says that, basically people are saying that they don't want their children, who often roam about unsupervised in the kids section, to come across material which they may not be ready for. But others are saying, through their friends, the internet, on television, they may have seen programs with divorced parents, with gays. I mean, so how should they react to this? I mean, Kelvin?
Stephen, when I hear this, I think that, yes, to some extent, it would be quite closeted as a parent to assume that I can protect my children from every avenue, because there's so many avenues in this day and age. So I don't necessarily believe, at least in my case for myself, I never hold to the fact that I'm going to keep my children under lock and key. But what I believe very strongly is that for my children, they are going to eventually be exposed, but where it is within my ability. And when I think about the library as a place for very free, easy access, and it's true my kids love to go to the library, I need to have an element of trust as I walk in to know that if my children are browsing through books, they're not going to stumble on some content that I might find not quite something that they're ready for at that point in time. So I don't believe parents all think that we're going to do this and more and to shield our children for the rest of their lives. That's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Adelia?
I think with respect to the library and whether there's a level of trust there, I don't think the library should be held in any different sort of regard to the internet. You wouldn't let your children browse the internet unsupervised. I wouldn't let them. I'll have the final say as to what sort of books they end up borrowing. But the thing is, to me, the issue of homosexuality and non-conventional families, so to speak, to me is not an issue at all. I don't think anybody chooses to be homosexual any more than they choose to be heterosexual. So for me, I think it's just a matter of fact, and it's something that I'm very comfortable for my child to find out about and for me to speak to him about.
So this is where people disagree. I guess they're saying, when are you ready for your children to be exposed? We know they exist, right?
Yes.
But yeah, Michelle?
Okay. I think there's a difference between age-appropriate and ability-appropriate. There could be a 5-year-old child who can take up the material and read it and understand it and have no adverse reaction to it. There could be another 5-year-old child, same demographic, same girl, let's say, background and all, and she reads the same material and is traumatized by it. So we need to be cognizant that there is that possibility that there are some children who will be quite disturbed after reading the material. And some children, after being disturbed, they may not talk to somebody, and then they will internalize this within themselves, and that's quite dangerous, because if they don't talk about it, we will never know what is troubling them. At 5 years old. And at 5 years old also, that child may not be able to express herself completely. So how do we do this? How do we manage this?
Well, let me bring Geraldine in. She is a psychologist. Geraldine, is there an appropriate age for children to be ready? And how concerned should we be that, when young children are exposed to such material, that they will be influenced by it?
if you look at the developmental age of the child, right? So we have a 0 to 2 year or 3-year-old child who are very concrete, very little concepts of the world, very little concepts of many things. They're very black and white. Okay? They don't have this higher self or the knowledge to discern. So these children, if you explain to them and you tell them about homosexuality, you tell them about adoption, you tell them about different colors, they have no color concept. But if you look at a 4 to 7-year-old and they start to have a little bit more concept, then they may have their own perceptions. It's good to clarify with them at that particular point in time. For my own children, when they happen to chance upon, I think, homosexuality on YouTube, the little ones go, homo means guy likes guy. And I go like, what do you mean? Guy likes guy. And these are 4-year-old and 6-year-old, and they go, okay, it just means a guy likes a guy. And the whole household was in uproar because they say, no, you can't watch the internet anymore, and they panic.
So
you have the grandparents worrying about it, and they go, no, your children cannot watch internet anymore. And they are looking at the adults going very puzzled, puzzled look on their faces. And we put the value onto the word.
Yeah. Well, Geraldine, let me pick up that point when you say, so they said a guy likes a guy, but in their context, they just understand it as it could have been a brother who loves a brother, I mean, so similarly, some people are asking, when the 4 or 6 years old kid had read this book, what would they have taken away from the story about the penguins?
It depends on what the adults put on the book, the value that the adult puts on the book. Because these children are looking at, through the world with lenses that are unblemished, uncolored. And when we are talking to them about certain values, certain ideas that we have, that's when we put our values into all these stories. And that becomes very dangerous. For example, the Kookaburra song, the famous Australian song, where there was a huge uproar, I think 4 years ago, where one of the teachers actually changed the words, gay your life must be, to fun your life must be. Mm-hmm. And the concept of gay, in his opinion, is being homosexual. But if you ask any child, the word gay is just happy, merry. Right. And that's exactly what they would tell you. But we as adults place the value onto the word. Right. With a negative connotation.
Well, whatever connotation we bring to it is because we are the parents. So again, it comes back to the parents teaching their children. Kelvin, Perry, your thoughts on this?
I think, Steve, you caught on to that quite well, because I think for this topic of homosexuality, I think the views can be quite polarizing, but I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong thing. I think people have different opinions and different value systems, and that would determine how they decide on this topic. Let me share another perspective on exposure to this topic. I think everyone, you can think back to your school days, in a primary school and a secondary school, you'd be in a class of 40. And in a class of 40, I think you are bound to have a few kids, 2 or 3 kids, girls or boys, girls who maybe a bit tomboyish, who prefer short hair and jeans, and boys who are a bit more gentle and who don't like to rough it out with the other boys. And if you keep in contact with these friends over the years, I think most likely you'll find that as adults, quite a few of these friends who are different when they're young, they turn out to be gay. And they may be openly gay today. I have a lot of such friends. And so, coming back to taking books out of the library, you can take books with LGBT content out of the library, but you can't take LGBT kids out of the classroom. And in society, you cannot take LGBT adults out of the society. And even if we think about restricting access to content, I don't think it's quite appropriate to put LGBT people in society into some restricted or PG corner. I don't think that would be very appropriate.
I completely agree with that. So I think the suggestion to put the books aside in a separate section, or maybe, like to put a parental advisory there, personally, I would prefer if the books were not separated, but if that is what is required to come to a compromise and to ensure that the kids have have access to these books, then I can accept that, and I would rather that they be separated than for them to be destroyed altogether.
I second that opinion.
Kelvin?
I had a chance to read the book Entangle Mix 3, and when I was reading that book, it was quite evident that from the beginning of the book, it talks about the setting at the Central Park Zoo in New York City, and how different families come together. When they talk about different families, then the story begins to build up very rapidly. And you can see that the authors take a lot of pain to paint a picture of what this alternative family unit setup, symbolized by these two male penguins, is like. And I think what, to me, perhaps is hard to take as a parent for me is because I find that this is making it out as something that, hey, this is a different lifestyle, and kids as young as my sons can begin to see that this is just part and parcel of what life is. And I guess my concern as a parent is that I'm not quite ready for my children to be exposed to this at this point in time yet. At some point in time later, they might be exposed. That will happen, I believe. But at this point in the young, impressionable lives, if they take this to become a norm, and there is a cumulative effect with these things over the passage of time, then what's going to happen is that they will grow up with this idea that this is indeed a norm, and they won't even begin to question it, and that's how society will move. So that's where I come from, and I take the stand that I would really prefer that these books be accessible by all means to any parents who chooses to want to access these books for their kids. That's fine, but maybe not for many of us.
Well, just to quickly add on, because I think most people have not had a chance to read the book, and the story is actually based on a factual event that happened at the zoo.
Yes,
so you're saying that the two penguins, I mean, like what we were talking about, Geraldine, earlier, could have been two brothers in that sense coming to care for a sick or the unhatched egg. So it's what, again, you felt the story was twisted in that sense to mean something else.
Yes, but then again, to be fair, these things will always involve a kind of value judgment. I mean, all of us are going to put our values to something like that. So what I've just said will probably have fuel a lot of other people who have opposed what I'm saying, but it's a value judgment.
We have a few callers with us. I'm going to get Desmond. Desmond, you're on the line with Talking Point. Go ahead, Desmond.
Hi, good evening. I'd just like to make a point about censorship. I think censorship is necessary in any society, and it's definitely necessary. It's always there to protect the vulnerable and the young. It becomes a value judgment then about what should be censored and what should not be censored. What my feeling is that we definitely want to censor certain things like pornography, like exposure to drugs, like things like violence. So the question really is homosexuality good or bad for a kid to be exposed to, and will it lead to a warped view or a changed view of what a kid's idea of a family is? My feel is that you shouldn't what do you call it? I mean, it doesn't help in any way to expose a kid too early to these themes, other than to confuse the child. Yeah, so that's my point.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Desmond. I'm going to take another caller. Charlie, you're on the line with Talking Point. Charlie, go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm here. Okay, my question, my point is I think that this type of book should be put in an area, a reserved area. Only the parents who are ready to talk to the children, their child, on this topic to borrow the books. Right? The reason is that assuming Singapore is largely conservative, right? So if a child is able to pick the book and run to the very conservative mother or father and say, what is this about? Right? And the father is not ready to speak about this topic and starts to condemn LGBT. Imagine that. We are trying to promote inclusiveness. Would this run counterproductive instead?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Charlie. Just heard from two there. Anyone? Quick reactions? Michelle? Kelvin?
I'm a bit uncomfortable with the word conservative that Charlie brought up because, okay, the conservatives of today perhaps were liberals in the past. So we are always looking at this conservative and liberal thing. I think these kind of typical names don't really help because they're just making a very general statement. What we probably want to do is learning from this whole incident is how maybe it's a good thing because we're all learning to question our beliefs and our stance and to take a stand. One of the things I hope my children will learn is that if they don't stand for something, they'll fall for anything. So to me, that's more important than anything else.
All right, Calvin, I'm going to cut you off here because we have to take off our break. We'll come back and talk about the discussion because it has been a learning lesson for all of us. And I think that's one of the issues people want to talk about moving forward, what can be done as well, and what are the expectations from the library. So do stay with us here on Talking Point. If you have thoughts, you can give us a call, 66910028. You can also tweet us at TellTP. We're back in just a bit.